Pisces 11, men seeking illumination. There are 4 conditions of discipleship: the purity of heart, mental clarity, emotional poise, and spiritual determination. All 4 are necessary, but between them they form the necessary and sufficient conditions for advancement. Now, to align with our highest sense of the divine, just so that at all times we know that we're in the presence of God, according to our own definition of what God is. Basically, that doesn't really need proof, because there must be a highest part of us. We're aware of a gradation of consciousness. Sometimes we're unconscious, like when we're sleeping. Sometimes we're just on autopilot, driving along a motorway or something. Sometimes we're highly alert and concentrated, like in an examination, for example. Sometimes we're aware of some atmosphere has just changed, and we need to be careful to see all that we can see. We know about levels of consciousness. So what we're saying is that there is the highest level of consciousness that we can attain to. And we look towards that when we're looking towards God. Whether you call that highest aspect of self God, or whether you say that's evidence pointing towards an even higher consciousness, which I call God, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you claim to be part of God's expression and God is separate from you, or part of God's expression and God is the highest part of you that you don't always align with. It doesn't matter. But the alignment does. If we are dedicated to our spiritual progression, then we have to align with our sense of God and come from that place in what we do on earth. And what we're saying in this degree is that the 4 conditions of discipleship are enough to take us there, to take us forward to our highest level in this lifetime. Purity of heart comes from the intention to help people, to be compassionate, caring, never blameful, forgiving, understanding. We know that. This isn't really a teaching anymore. If it needed to be taught a couple of thousand years ago, or maybe before that with Buddha, if it needed to be taught, well, it has been taught. We know what a pure heart does. It loves, and it loves because it is a loving instrument. It doesn't love because the object is love-worthy or personally important. It loves because it's a loving heart, and somehow it manages to love whatever the heart looks at, whether it's nature or a person or a situation. It's just a loving heart, and it's pure of intent. So if you notice yourself not feeling pure-hearted in any situation, that's good to notice. There's an imperfection there, and it just needs to be noticed. And very often, noticing is enough. What we have to do is to practice pure-heartedness, not as a behavior set, but as a feeling. And we practice, I find it really beneficial to notice how much I appreciate nature and how much I appreciate music. And when I'm constantly surrounded by these beautiful things in life that I love, like nature, music, not people in that example, then when it comes to people, I can actually find them a lot easier to deal with and radiate that loving heart which I develop in nature and in music. towards them. So the purity of heart is a lot to do with intention. Now, purity of mind is the end of anxiety and confusion, and the mind can be cleared by processes of philosophy and study and argument and debate and clarification in teachings and so on. You start to work things out with your mind when you're given the tools. So reading a lot of books and talking to people with opinions worth listening to, and several is better than one. It's not so very good, or not so very smart to follow one teacher. However much you approve of that teacher, several is better, and several books, and several systems of thought. And eventually you get to the point where your mind can see that what is consistent is this package of beliefs. And that package which these people teach and those people teach doesn't actually check out. Doesn't check out within itself. It's not self-consistent. And this is true of a lot of the spiritual teachings that you pick up. You can't make any sense out of it. And then they say, oh, it's metaphor. Well, it's not. It's just wrong. It's just wrong, and the Bible, for example, is filled with inconsistencies. And it's not metaphor at all. It's just wrong. And you have to sort of see that the emperor is wearing no clothes at some point. And the mind has to stay sharp enough to say, look, hang on a sec, that doesn't check out. That's not physically possible. But you have to agree, believe in miracles. Okay, but that actually says something different from that. Yeah, but there's a metaphor there. No, it's not. You have to get that clear-minded discipline sorted out. And some of us are better able to do that than others, but I don't think wisdom is correlating to intelligence. I don't think you have to be super bright to have a clear mind, to be honest. My grandfather was not super bright at all. He spent his whole life as a carpenter. But he didn't make foolish mistakes. He wasn't a foolish man. His mind was clear, limited perhaps in his ability to prattle on with philosophy, but he didn't make mistakes of thinking. He knew what was what. And you find that very often with more simple-minded people. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but simply minded people, that they don't make mistakes very often. And my grandfather was one of those. He just didn't make mistakes. So it's that kind of clear mind we're looking for, a mind which is not anxious or confused. Now we have to keep on with this determination to move forward all the time. We don't stop. We don't do it and then we've done it. It's not like that. We decide to do it actually eternally. We take on the process of being someone who progresses on a soul level. The soul has this yearning to be more and more like God, which is, in a sense, a more and more expanded version of itself. And when we feel this appetite for self-improvement, the Sufis would say that all we're experiencing is ishq, the yearning to be one with God again. And of course it gets distorted. Our visionary yearning to reclaim our divinity gets distorted into ambition. We want to be more important in the world. Not really anymore because that brings us closer to God, because it doesn't, but because that sense of growth and progression is a version of what we would need to do to get closer to God. But it gets distorted by money and such like. So, if we have this spiritual determination to progress, and we have a pure heart and a clear mind, then what happens is this emotional tranquility replaces disturbance. We don't get upset anymore. Nothing bothers us anymore. We're at peace.